Hello aspiring programmers, my name is Lee Shaver, and this video is about designing video games with Python, specifically PyGame and PyGame Zero. I am not a professional programmer, I am not a software engineer, I'm just a guy who loves learning new things and sharing my learning with others. All of the information in this video came from this book, Coding Games in Python. This video assumes that you already have Python installed on your computer. You also have PyGame and PyGame Zero installed. If you do not and need help with that, check out the card here to get started with that. Use this video wisely, pause it, fast forward it, rewind it, review parts that you need to, look closely. If things don't work, ask the internet, work the problem, and at the end of this video there are some troubleshooting strategies. Happy programming.
So our second game, Coin Collector, is also a very simple game. It does have twice as much code as the first game. It introduces Boolean variables, global variables, drawing text on the screen, function placeholders, Python's clock module, Python Zero's update function, and keyboard inputs. So looking here at the pseudocode in the form of a flowchart, the game starts and it sets the score to 0, and then it asks a question: is the time up? If the answer is yes, then we show the final score and the game ends. If the time is not up, then we ask, is an arrow being pressed? If it is yes, then we move the fox, and we can still continue to ask, is the time up? And then we ask again, is the arrow being pressed? If the answer is no, it asks if the fox is touching a coin. If it is yes, increase the score and place the coin somewhere else, and we repeat that loop until the answer to the time up question is yes, and then we end the game. Here's the game. The fox moves with my keyboard inputs, and I'm trying to collect the coin as many times as I can within 7 seconds, and the game ends. So to begin with, in my master Pythons folder, I have a new folder called Coin Collector, and in there I have an images folder, and I've included 2 images. I have a third for my modifications, which I'll show later. So I'm going to open up Python idle. I'm going to create a new file. And the first thing I'm going to do is going to save that file. And I'm just going to call it coin. I'm going to make sure that I put it in my master folder. So the first thing that we're going to do is going to set the width and height of our gameplay area. I'm going to create a variable called score, and I'm going to set it to 0 at the beginning of the game. I'm going to create a variable called game over, and at the beginning of the game, I'm going to set it to false. I'm going to introduce 2 actors. The first one is fox. I'm going to place that fox. I'm going to introduce an actor called coin. I'm going to place that coin here. I've missed some equals signs. So I've just set up variables. I haven't placed anything on the screen yet. So if I were to run this, nothing would happen. Probably other than the game board being shown, perhaps. Let's take a look. I'm going to test it. Aha, invalid. Perhaps I forgot a comma? Yes, I forgot an equals sign to define my variable. I'll save it and run it again. Actor is not defined. Aha, that's because I haven't told Python that I'm using the module PyGame run. Import PGZ run. Then, which means at the very end of my code, I need to tell Python to run that module. PGZ run.go, save and run. Game board, 400 by 400. Great. Now let's draw some things on a screen with a function that we're going to call draw. There, our function draw right now fills the screen with green. It puts the fox and the coin on the screen, and then we're drawing some text on the screen. Anything in quotation marks is going to be the actual text in there. We call that a string. So it will put on the screen whatever I put in between those quotation marks. And then we're adding to that another string. That's what this means. So it's taking this variable score, which right now is a number, it's a quantity, and that's how Python sees it. We're telling Python, please print that on the screen as a string, so as actual characters. And then we're saying we want that text black, and we would like the text to begin on our screen 10 down from the top and 10 to the right from the top. So let's save our code and run it and see what happens. And there it is. Now the rest of our code is going to include 3 different functions. We need a function that's going to place the coin after we collect it, and we need a function that's going to set the time and set our variable game over to true after 7 seconds, and then we need a function that's going to run all the actions of our game, like moving and collecting the coins. So I'm going to insert these functions, but I'm going to just put them as placeholders so I know they're there, and then I can come back later and actually fill in the code that will define those functions. Okay, when Python ever sees pass, it knows just to skip over that. Like I said, these are just placeholders for our functions, and we'll define them in a moment. So first we'll define the place coin function, which just places our coin on the screen. So there's our function. And remember that this is a variable that we defined at the very top, and it's placing a random integer between 20 and this integer here. But it's not going to work yet if I run it. Can you guess why? You guessed it, because we have not imported randint. Okay, and now we need to call that function placeCoin. And now let's define our function timeUp. In this function, we are telling Python that this variable here, game over, we are now declaring as a global variable. We have 2 basic types of variables. We have local variables and global variables. A local variable is one that only works within the function where you're using it. And a global variable is one that all elements of the game can use. And so here, we are wanting to use this variable for the rest of the game. And then we're saying that now, when this function is called, when timeUp is called, game over now becomes true. And these are our Boolean variables. Okay, a Boolean variable is either true or false, 1 or 0, on or off. So now that timeUp is defined, the program needs to run it, but it needs to run 7 seconds after the game starts, and we can use Python Zero's built-in tool clock to do this. This tool lets the program call a function after a specified amount of time. Now in our draw function, we want to include what happens if game over becomes true. Okay, let's test it. Save, run. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bingo, it's working. But we can't move the fox yet, so we need to define this update function. It's asking a question, have I pressed the left key on the keyboard? And if I have, then I'm going to take my fox's X position. This is a variable that we defined above. And I'm going to subtract 2 from it. Let's test it out. Yay, I'm moving left, but I can't move anywhere else. So it's working. And now let's get the fox moving in the other directions. See if it works. Up, right, down, left. Fantastic. And the last thing that we need to do within our update function is to ask, has the fox touched the coin? And if so, increase the score and replace the coin. Okay, so to find a local variable called coin collected, and it says that it means when the fox has collided with the coin. And if that's true, we're going to increase 10 to the variable score, and we're going to replace the coin in a random position. Let's save it and run it. Okay, we've got a problem. Local variable score. I'll look into this. So, because I've used this variable here, Python knows this as a local variable, and I only defined it way up here. So I need to tell Python that this is now a global variable. It's working, I'm scoring points. The coin is so far away. So as always, you're encouraged to make modifications and hacks to your game in any way that you want, and you can. Perhaps you can choose a different actor for either the fox or the coin. Perhaps you can change the size of the play area or the color of the play area. Perhaps you can make more or less time for the game. Maybe you can make the fox move faster or slower. Be creative. On my modification, I've made the game board a little bit bigger. I've made Mario instead of a fox. Mario also moves a little faster, and if I press the space bar, I can increase the speed. I'll lose Mario. Happy programming.
Here are some common debugging strategies. Have you indented properly? Is everything spelled correctly? Are there any extra spaces at the start of a line? Have you confused any numbers or letters such as 0 and O? Have you used the correct case for all letters? Do opening parentheses have a matching closing parenthesis? Does every quotation mark have a matching closing quotation mark? Have you asked someone else to check your code? Have you saved your code in the correct location? Have you saved your code since you last made changes? Have you asked the internet?